XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Pro AV TV. Thank you very much for joining us on such a hot, sunny summer's day. I am joined by someone else who is sheltering from the hot summer's day by hiding inside an air-conditioned studio just like I am. I've got Dean here joining me from Panasonic. How are you, Dean?
I'm doing very well, Carl. Yeah, thank you very much for having us. It is definitely a bit of a sweltering day.
It's nice to be inside, hiding away from it all. Thank you very much for giving up your time out of your busy schedule to come and chat PTZs with us. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah, pleasure.
So, do you want to start by describing a little bit about your role at Panasonic?
Yep. Yeah, so my name's Dean Offord. I take care of the remote camera products that we promote here. So you might might have seen Panasonic PTZs without even realizing. I've got them next to me right here. And we specialize as Panasonic in all kind of verticals, so education, corporate, live events, rentals, you name it. We really focus in this particular category. So my job there is to make sure they're talked about and promoted in the best way possible.
Excellent. So as we go throughout the session, we've got some slides to run through to give people at home a bit of an overview of the PTZ line, because PTZ lines can, let's face it, get a little bit confusing. I mean, lots of them look very similar. For those of us coming from the camcorder world, where you can see lots of varying different sizes and all the rest of it, or the cinema camera world, it can be quite a struggle to get familiar and understand some of the differences between PTZs. But also just for people who are in the day-to-day grind of using PTZs, sometimes it is nice to take a step back and look at the whole lineup again from fresh, just to remind yourselves of where we're at. So people watching this at home, as we go through, I can see the chat there. Someone called Orlando has just said, howdy, Carl. Hello, Orlando. Thank you for tuning in.
Hello.
As we go through, if you have any questions at all, just leave them there in the chat. If they're relevant to what we're talking about as we go, I will bring them up and ask them as we go. If there's something which is better saved until the end, I'll just save until the end and we'll have a bit of a Q&A session at the end. So if I haven't brought up your question, please don't worry. Hopefully I'll try and get back to it at the end unless I lose track of everything. Who knows? I will do my best. But yeah, do we want to crack on, Dean?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's take a look. Right, so I will be honest, Carl, you're frozen on my screen, not because of you, I don't think. So I can't see the PowerPoint.
Just in case this causes problems, let's explain what's going on. We've got a little bit of a problem with the Skype setup that we're using, in that it all seems to be fine, my end, and Dean's coming through in beautiful crisp 1080p, but my feedback to him is completely frozen, so he can't see what slide I'm on. But I've moved on to the first slide, D.
Okay, we'll find a way. What I will ask is my colleague Ollie. So, yeah, the first slide, why we're here today and what we're talking about is really Panasonic PTZs. Where do they go and what do they do? So PTZs are used, again, as I said earlier, into lots of different verticals. And I think a lot of customers out there that think Panasonic PTZs are just designed for broadcast. They're actually not. They're used in churches, corporates, education. There's a lot more people that can now access these PTZs a lot easier. And I think there's a lot of confusion because, as you knew, Carl, there's a lot of different models and they all do very different things. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through that and really break down what the differences are and how they can help anybody's production. And I think you've also experienced, Carl, especially during the pandemic, PTZs have increased drastically. And I think 7 years ago when I started, people didn't really know what PTZs were. I thought they were very complicated. But now today, I think they're incredibly accessible and networking isn't such a scary concept. So it's just getting a grasp of what that is.
I mean, obviously the PTZs have been very well established for many, many years. And I think those people that were currently working with PTZs have found themselves busier because of the pandemic. But then at the same time, people who had no experience of this world at all of a sudden had to learn it very quickly because remote production was the only way of doing any production for such a long time. And I think as we're now coming out the other end of the pandemic and things are starting to relax a little bit, I think it is going to have changed the way that a lot of our customers approach production. So it's definitely something for everyone to start becoming aware of. Whether they use it all the time, who knows, but it's definitely something that I think customers need to be aware of and how to use them because they will come up against them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you saw in the picture there, we've had all sorts of weird and wonderful projects. PTZs have been used from being inside bear caves, or they've been used in Metallica concerts. It's quite amazing the versatility and adaptability of the cameras that can be done. And also, just as Panasonic, we offer a lot of different online resources to also be able to explain them a little bit better as well. So, yeah, and I think with you guys at Pro AV, you've got the best kit to put it all together too, because there's a lot of workflows inside the PTZs.
Absolutely. I mean, looking here at a slide about flyaway kits, which I think is possibly one of the most common uses for these, especially in today's world, where they need to just quite quickly set up any sort of production with one person operating it all.
Yeah, exactly. So in these kind of examples, you'd be able to take some different flight cases. You can just pack away a couple of these cameras into a kit. Most typical setup would be a little 3-camera setup. So you have a camera in the center, and then you've got a camera maybe on stage or stage left, and also a camera on the right. As you're using right now for the production in a TriCaster mix, we start to utilize NDI. So we can take video over networks and things as well, so it's really easy to set it all up. And the cameras can also be powered by a network switcher, so we don't need to have power supplies all the time, so we can just use a single cable to power the cameras up to 100 meters, plug them in and run a professional production. We see a lot of people use them for weddings as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, as a package, there's some AV type people that go out and actually set up a couple of the white cameras, put them on stands, and then capture the day without it being really intrusive.
I mean, NDI is doing some fantastic things for things like this, because especially with the new NDI 5 that's been announced. I mean, you're using a little network over there with PTZ filming you right now. With NDI 5, you know, when that starts to release later on in the year, you will be able to bring your sources in over the internet in exactly as if they were sources here in the studio. And so for these breakaway, flyaway kits of PTZs, the world of remote production is becoming more and more capable. They're going to become more and more important and powerful as time goes on. So this is your lineup, the new look lineup. I think this is a really good chart to explain some of the differences between the models and stop them all just becoming a bit of a jumble.
Yeah, so again, Panasonic, I don't know if a bit of history, but we've been doing PTZs for about 10 years now. And we were one of the first major Japanese manufacturers to start doing PTZs. It came from box camera technology, and it started to become more and more integrated. The first camera that we did as a PTZ was called HE100. It was a tank. It was absolutely massive, but they're still being used today. Those cameras that were made 10 years ago, would you believe, they're still working. So it's a bit of a testament to some of the Japanese engineering behind the scenes. And the cameras are really designed for reality broadcast originally. So they got to run 24 hours a day. Some of the UK's best loved shows that have been filmed on it. I think in the Netherlands recently as well, like Big Brother is a really good example. A contestant actually took one of these home as a prize. But they're really designed for that. So that kind of reality show technology then started to go into corporate and education, where it's also running 24 hours a day. And then people, again, using them for live events, it works perfectly. So they last a very, very long time, and they're incredibly ergonomic in that sense. And I just saw in this chart here, it's easy to separate it. You can see in the bottom row the HD lineup, and in the top line, you've got the 4K lineup as well. And PTZs are going more and more into 4K. 4K has a lot of benefits inside small integrated cameras as well, like being able to crop in post-production. And we can definitely apply these cameras. You have a UE150 in front of you. We can use Vlog, which I know you're familiar with. So we can actually put a grade inside the camera.
Yeah, I mean, the more cinematic elements that we're used to from cinema cameras and camcorders, you know, the larger sensors, the log outputs, the high-tech quality 10-bit, all of that has now come to PTZ. I mean, people don't associate PTZs with image quality historically at all. It's not the industry perception. And yet we're absolutely at a point where some of these PTZs, particularly like the UE150 here next to me, has just as high an image quality as pretty much any camcorder you can buy on the market, really. Not cinema camera, but camcorder. I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. So they have been used, let's say in Netflix productions as well. So you wouldn't realize that you're actually using or seeing a remote camera in some of these productions too. So it's quite amazing how far they've been coming. And I think there's a lot of people that are concerned that they're going to take away from the cinematic cameras or something, but we see it as it enhances and it adds a new perspective and a new dimension to these productions as well.
Yeah, I think that is something that quite a lot of our customers as well, being coming from that camera operating, when they're coming from the camera operating world and starting to learn about PTZs for the first time, there is a bit of that hesitancy of, but camera operators are so important, don't get rid of camera operators. these aren't to get rid of camera operators. Nearly always these are used in a situation where you wouldn't be hiring 5 camera operators to do it.
Yeah.
But it's making those situations now actually elevating them in terms of production quality, which is just good for the entire industry.
Exactly. So many cameras at one time, one person be able to do lots of different movements and positions as well. So I think in the next slide we got that where it starts to break it down, and you can see it here, the real differences. So again, lots of different models, but these little ones here, the UE4 that you see, these have been used in more of an esports application, but at the same time they've also been used in education. They have a microphone built in. It's got a nice wide lens, so it's absolutely spot on for little fixed rig stuff. We can just plug in our little Ethernet cable and then run an HDMI, or plug it in and use it as a webcam.
So am I right in thinking those are ones which don't actually do the pan and tilt?
Well, digitally it does, yeah.
So because we
use the 4K sensor inside, and then we can crop in 4 times, and then we can actually move around the sensor. So it's a special. These ones as well. That's when we start to have the physical pan tilt movement. So these are probably the most recognizable, I think, people watching. So yeah, and as you can see in that chart there as well, we've got all the kind of different verticals and applications where they typically fit in, and we would say that's where the price points go as well in HD to 4K. So we'd say, depending on the budgets, that's where you start to look at for the applications as well, with studios being typically more on the higher end of the budget scheme.
And what here, if you had to pick out some of these as being some of the most popular choices, some of the real go-to options, which would you pick?
Oh god! So yeah, no 2 days are the same, which makes the job great. No, the most popular ones sit typically here. So we have HN38 and HE42. They're really good go-to cameras, and the reason for that is because you've got 20 times optical zoom. They're nice, discreet. They tick all the boxes for a lot of different applications. So we do move a lot of these, and especially we've had a lot of kind of church projects in particular. In the US, as you probably know, the church business out there is absolutely massive. So PTZ is very much in full swing over there. But the UE150 as well, our top flagship one, that has just been adopted and used in absolutely everything. So that really is so much demand for that particular camera as well, because there's not many cameras like it on the market. So
it's one of those cameras that, like I said, is really pushing forward and changing some of the perception of PTZ cameras on the market. This has got some serious image quality inside it. It's a serious sensor.
Yeah, 1-inch 4K sensor, ticks a lot of the boxes for a lot of different applications. So yeah, we really do. We move quite a lot of these, and again, it depends on different projects that we receive, but you can have projects where you have hundreds of cameras being requested as well. So the smaller ones typically will go in, they'll be used in universities, they'll be used in corporations for their meetings or for lecture capture, which is obviously that's exploded since the pandemic for distance learning and teaching. So having these cameras with a high quality plugged in, like I'm shooting on a UE150 now, it's really essential. And the main thing here is that I can operate it just by myself, and I've just got my laptop in front of me.
I mean, I've got a camera in front of me here that isn't a PTZ. I've got it's a C300 coming into the TriCaster, and it looks great, but it is what it is. So if I move at all, we can't do anything about it. I have to stay here in this chair, otherwise the stream doesn't work. Whereas you can move about, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, all while we're live without having to do anything else. So for this sort of shooting yourself environment, PTZs are very powerful.
They are. They definitely are. And we can actually show that as well a little bit inside here too. I've actually connected everything in our studio here in Panasonic. We made it a bit more purpose-made since the pandemic. Even us as a big manufacturer making these PTZs, we also had to find a solution to be able to deliver content online and film training products and all these kind of things too. So we adapted a lot of our kit. So if I go onto here, I have our HLC 100 mixer connected. You can now see the laptop that I've got on here, and we can actually see the web interface of the PTZ. So this is the UE150 I'm using here in the studio. And then just as we're saying, it's got a built-in web interface. I can start to move, zoom, so we can move out, move in, select different presets. It's really, really simple. So again, everything's built in and super easy to use.
Sure.
So imagine that with lots of different cameras. We'll talk a little bit more about the softwares, but I thought it's much better to actually see it in application sometimes. And it's a really nice, clean interface. And all of the cameras have this. So all you need is a network switch, network cables, connect them up, and then you're sending your SDI, HDMI, or your NDI signals, wherever your capture source is, and then we're good to go.
Absolutely. So let's get back to some of this lineup breakdown. You've got a series of slides here, one after the other, just highlighting the difference between each camera in terms of focusing on one feature at a time, starting at zoom. And I think most of these across the board are around the 20 times zoom, aren't they? There's a couple of standouts, like the UE100 with 24 times, and certainly that HE38 with its 30 times. Well, that's a lot of zoom range.
Yeah, most projects that we actually do, typically 20 times has been quite safe. We don't really get many more projects that requires longer distance than that. But if you think of most halls or theatres and things like this, if you're at the back of the room, having that 20 times is spot on. And it's also really important as well as its sensitivity that's also carried during those long zoom ranges as well. So the PTZs really handle themselves quite well. And in the UB100 and UB150, we have special modes called high sensitivity. So we can actually brighten the image even more inside the sensor without actually having to introduce any gain. So we have little tricks inside the PTZs. So if we need to get a little bit more out, that's the key. And when you have a live event and you're using cameras, you've got lots of lights going off, lots of contrast, or maybe you've got screens, projectors, or what have you. We can customize with the shutter speed and everything really simply just from the computer.
Excellent. This shows some of the connection methods. It's interesting just to see which ones have got SDI and which ones don't. So I believe the UE100 and UE150 are the only ones with the 12G SDI, right?
Correct. And still, I think one of the very few PTZs in the market that do have 12G SDI. Yeah. Still quite an emerging way of delivering 4K, but we're seeing more and more applications. Again, as Panasonic, we do projectors and displays that'll be able to also support 12G. So we're starting to see these proper 4K workflows come in. And there's a lot of benefit in production scenarios to be able to capture 4K over 12G and not just rely on HDMI, because we know how limiting that is just to send a 4K signal. But I think that's where full bandwidth NDI is also really important, which we'll get onto on the next slides. UB150 and UB100s, all of those outputs work at exactly the same time. So in fact, simultaneous output is possible in all of the cameras. So we can send the HDMI, SDI, or fiber and 12G, all video signals, they all down convert as they need to without you really having to do anything. The camera processes it all. So there's a lot of application for that. And
I think that is something that, again, I'm going to focus quite a bit on, because quite a lot of our customers are people using PTZs for the first time. I think that is something that sometimes surprises people a lot for the first time, because coming from camcorders and cinema cameras, often all the outputs aren't live at the same time. You've got to choose one of them. You know, you enable the HDMI or you enable the SDI. And so just simply having all of the ports active all of the time at the back, so that you can have a little HDMI onboard monitor at the back of them if you want, running perfectly fine, plus the SDI signal being sent, and then Ethernet connected for camera control, all the rest of it, all just running at full quality all of the time. I think it's something people overlook a lot.
Exactly, especially when you're taking your proxy recordings as well, for example. So you could send your live mix to your mixer from SDI, and then you could also take the HDMI and put it into a recorder. So you've got lots of different options for capturing exactly at the same time. Get out of jails.
I mean, lots of people already own little recorders like Blackmagics or Atmoses, and they're becoming more and more affordable. So absolutely, very much a feasible option.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the IP stream, sending the video over the network, that's always activated as well. So it doesn't switch off.
So let's talk about PoE, Power over Ethernet. I think we'll assume some knowledge for people at home of what PoE is, but what are the key things to pay attention to here with the lineup?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So for those that don't know, PoE stands for Power over Ethernet. It was a technology that we started to incorporate in the cameras again about 5-6 years ago. And what that means is that if we have a network switcher like you might have at home, a little Wi-Fi router that you connect to the internet, it's the same principle. We use that network hub to plug into the cameras. So we plug our Cat5 in. And what that means is on the back, when we have our little LAN port here, we send all the power, video, and control, and even audio, straight to the camera. And the power standards are the important thing to know. So PoE, like the UB4 here, just stands for standard power over Ethernet. That's around 25.5 watts. And then we've got PoE plus, so it goes up another 25. And then we've got PoE plus plus, and it goes up another 25 watts. So that's basically the type of power switch that we send has different different power rates. So the cameras are kind of hungry for power in their own different ways. Okay, so PoE, you'll find these with a lot of phones are powered by PoE. And then PoE Plus has been pretty standard for all PTZs now. And then PoE Plus Plus, we'd be looking at something like a more powerful switch or a more powerful injector. And the reason why that we use PoE technology, even us as Panasonic, when you see us at trade shows or doing any kind of event with PTZ, we typically leave the power supplies that do normally come with the cameras inside the boxes, because we can send power over 100 meters. So you can see a lot of value in that. So when you're going up to an event and you want to set up, you can just send a couple of Cat5 cables and all your power is sent from one place.
And it's a cable you're going to want to run to those cameras anyway, which is the crucial bit. You know, you want that for camera control. So you might as well have it sending you power at the same time.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So most installations now don't typically spec a little power port for the cameras. So it's a lot more economical.
Sure. And NDI.
Yep. Always the flavour of the month.
I mean, it is a great
everywhere.
technology. It's something that our customers, whenever we explain to them what it is, they latch right onto it, because I think it really sums up a lot of the reasons why people are looking at remote cameras for the first time. And that's the being able to control them remotely, conveniently, just the idea of having one cable running to every single camera, and that's all that you have to do, is very, very appealing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the real secret to NDI as well is that video quality you get over a network cable. So NewTek and the NDI team have very much been on a mission to try and get SDI quality video over a network, and has been kind of mastering that year on year. As Panasonic, at the time I joined, that's when NDI really started to be adopted as well, and we started to integrate it into all of our product range. And I think we're still, as a manufacturer, one of the biggest adopters of NDI. And it's not just in the PTZs, you get it in camcorders as well. CX10, CX350 also have NDI. And the real main benefits of NDI is that we do have that high quality video over a single Ethernet cable. And we also have control. We can send tally signals. So when the presenters need to look at which camera is also being switched. So for example, your TriCaster, when you select the PTZ, the tally light would activate automatically. So that's one of the great benefits of NDI without any additional cabling. And it just gets better and better in terms of quality. So NewTek do release new tools. The quality or applications also improve with that. So it's an incredibly powerful technology that we use a lot. And I think the biggest question as well is NDI-HX and full bandwidth NDI. So NDI-HX is a much more efficient data rate, so it's about 12 to 40 megabits per second. And then we also have full bandwidth NDI, and we're looking up to a gig. And that basically is how much data we're sending over the network. So not going into the too nerdy technical parts, but yeah, it's how much data we can send over it. It seems really complicated, but it's not. It's incredibly efficient, and I think the future in the next 5 years, especially, we're going to see even more just IP workflows, and I think SDI, for example, is we're going to get less and less in these infrastructures because networking is so much more convenient.
I completely agree. And the other big thing is that these free tools exist, because in an SDI workflow, in order to get an extra little monitor or something like that, you've got to have that kit there ready to hand, and that's not cheap kit. Whereas with a NDI workflow, all it takes is somebody to use their own laptop, boot up one of these NDI studio monitor for free, connect it to the network, and you can use it as a client monitor.
Exactly. And in the camcorders, for example, if you were to then control it from, let's say, TriCaster or HLC 100, for what we do, you can actually control the zoom completely over a network as well. So,
and would you get that in studio monitor? in the free NDI app.
Yes.
You get PTZ control in that as well, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, really simple to use. So we can take a look at that a bit later, actually, because I have Studio Monitor loaded on here. Always a useful one to have.
So what's 3D? And that's
3D.
Me slurring my words. It's free, FREE, by the way, for anyone.
Yeah. 3D. It's one of the most exciting elements we do in PTZs, which people don't even realize, but virtual reality and augmented reality. I'm not talking about just the goggles, but talking about it in the broadcasting or Pro AV space. It's become even more accessible to be able to use something called this 3D protocol, and it connects with, you might be familiar with the Unreal Engine from Epic. It's a graphics engine, a graphics provider. Basically what we can do is the PTZs like the UE100s and the UE150 you have there, they can plug into these graphics engines. So some examples would be Zero Density, for example, or VizRT is another one. And what it means is the cameras can move and it coordinates inside a virtual space. And we won't mention it because there might be some customers out there that are thinking about AR and VR production. It is absolutely taking off. Beyond belief in AR and VR, because you can have these studios where you can then create whatever kind of background and backdrop that you want to do, but having it in a small form factor in a PTZ to work inside that space with high quality is detrimental. So we've done a lot of corporate installations, for example, installing the cameras, taking this 3D data, and all 3D means is it's sending the positional data to the graphics engine so it knows where it's coordinating.
Sure.
So we were the first to really do it inside the PTZs. We put it as a firmware update. It was a test, and it's absolutely taken off.
I mean, you can see why it would do. I mean, if you look at both of our sets behind us right now, you know, with an engine like this, these could very easily just be green screen behind us.
Yeah.
And then you happen to have picked a picture of a wooden wall, and I've got this asset loaded in, and then as we zoom in and zoom out or pan left and right, it moves with us. You can absolutely see why corporate environments, just using it very simply, it would really take off.
Exactly, and you don't have to necessarily be a master. Again, if you had the UB100s and you had Unreal loaded, because it is a free application as well, originally designed for games development, but now it's being applied in the video production space. And it's really amazing to see what people are being able to create and start to use with the cameras on that side. So again, another emerging technology we'll start to see.
And it's the UE150 and the UE100 that have that bit of technology built in?
Yep, all from the box.
Gotcha. So before we get on to the next bits, because I think the next bits start to break down a few more specific bits, let's answer some questions. Video editor Bloke, one of our regular viewers, hello, welcome back, has given two little questions. The first one, which I'll do first because we were just talking about NDI. He says, is there any delay with NDI transmission? Does it need to be resynced to line up with audio? And are all cameras in a system synced? And is it dependent on cable length, etc.? What's your experience? I mean, I can talk a little bit about our experience here, but you've done lots more different NDI installs than I have. What do you find people normally struggle with delay?
So with our two different flavors of NDI, as I was saying, NDI-HX and full bandwidth NDI. For UK viewers, I'll say semi-skimmed and full fat milk. It's the best way. The best way I can explain that. NDI-HX, it's something called RTSP. It's an H.264 compressed feed, and it's rewrapped into this NDI-HX container, which then sends all the tally information, control data, and all this kind of thing. There is a slight delay with this as well. So we have up to, I think roughly in my experience, it's up to 3 frames you can see. But there's a lot of different factors around that as well. So what cabling you're using. So Cat5e grade above is best. Cat6, we would say, would be better. Depends what is going into. So, and also what data you're sending. Is it 1080p? Is it 720p? These can have all the effects of what that data rate is. You would find full bandwidth NDI, like on the UB100, there's next to no latency. It's very similar to SDI and HDMI. But again, you just need to have upgraded networking capability to, if you have
Yes.
lots of cameras.
The technology has no latency, but it is dependent on your networking. And so if you have a good switch, all will be fine. If you're trying to get by or your switch settings are set slightly wrong, that could introduce a little bit of delay. And he specifically mentions, are all cameras in system synced? Normally we find they are, just with normal full fat NDI, perfectly fine. But at the new version of NDI, which is going to be launching in a few months' time, NDI 5, actually I believe does have Genlock built into it. So you will properly be able to sync everything officially.
Yeah. That is really exciting, actually.
Yeah.
And also, they have a lot of remote production elements inside NDI Tools 5 as well. So we're quite excited to see what could be done with that, meaning the camera's in a completely different location.
Yep.
And then being able to use NDI in that way is really exciting.
We could be bringing you into this stream right now, for example, not using Skype, which would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, managing perfectly.
Okay. His other question, which before we move on to the other slides, I noticed in photos of a newly launched TV channel that all of their studio cameras are PTZs, which I thought was interesting. Can movement be controlled smoothly enough to replace traditional camera moves? What do you think?
Really excellent question. So we're talking about on-air moves with PTZs.
Yes,
On-air obviously being the hardest thing to achieve, isn't it? Because that's why you need an operator. It's very unique. So luckily, the question is what makes a good PTZ mechanically as well, and it is in the mechanics. And with the PTZs, we can use different bits of software. For example, we have some on-air software called Tuning S. And what that can do is we can actually coordinate different preset positions and movements and coordinate it. And you wouldn't necessarily know it's a PTZ move. With UE100, we have actually no gears inside. We have something called direct drive, so it's even smoother in its panning and tilting. So the only thing that stops a camera, or it's obvious it's a PTZ, is that it's obviously fixed. So if it's on a tripod, your field of view is kind of limited, isn't it, in the range that you can move around in. So that's where if you put it on dollies, where we can move it left and right, because again, we're going to more production, combining PTZs with these systems. That's where you start to really get some nice on-air moves. And you combine it with that software, you can start to get some really nice on-air style ones. And we do have new studios, for example, using UB150s all around the world in that kind of environment, loaded onto dollies, and you wouldn't think that was a PTZ.
Absolutely.
So the answer is yes.
Yes. But out of the box, again, an interesting point on that I have come up against with lots of customers is that out of the box, they tend to be quite fast and twitchy. And that's on purpose, because the majority of people using PTZs have them as preset positions, and they want to have a camera in a preset position, cut to a different one, then very quickly move that camera one to a different preset position, and then cut back to it. And so on purpose, I think manufacturers like yourselves, I presume anyway, do it on purpose. They set it to the fast, quick move presets. But especially if they've got good motors in them, like the UE100, you can fine-tune that as much as you want.
Exactly, and this is where remote operation panels, which we'll go into, that's where you can use the joystick, and it's really synchronized with the movement of the PTZ. So you can do really incremental movements or really large movements, and it's tailored around that kind of joystick. So there's lots of different ways you can do it. So live, we would say, if you're doing a live production, a remote panel is definitely the way to go for that. Otherwise, you've got the interface.
Let's move on to remote panels, shall we? Because it's very nearly the next slide anyway. Let's just skip the wall mounts and move straight on to that.
Perfect. So we have in remote panels quite a few different varieties and different ways of controlling. So as I said in the beginning, all of the cameras have a web interface built in, so we can access them and we can start to move them out of the box. And then we have handheld remotes like the RM50A. So it looks like a TV remote, IR, you can just move the cameras, it starts to go. And then we've got the RP60, RP150, and then all other little bits of software on top of that as well, like PTZ Control Center. And that's where we're controlling many cameras at one time in a free piece of software. And we also have mixers like the HLC100, that's got a built-in control. So again, similar to TriCaster, you can use the joystick controller on the PTZs there, combining it with NDI. So it's quite, I'd say that the control section of what we do is quite easy to understand in that sense. The little control panel and the larger control panel, the little one's great for your pop-up productions. You've got 5 camera selects you can easily do, and you can switch with your presets. And the control panels do up to 200 cameras as well, so which would be amazing for a production.
Yeah, if you can find an operator that can control 200 cameras at once, you hang on to that operator, because blimey, that's impressive.
Yeah, I think there's a story in 24 Hours in A&E, that entire production with many, many cameras happening at once, they were using the small control panel for the entire shoot, which is,
wow.
That's one amazing operator, I think.
That's
so,
incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, so, but from there, again, a lot of people think the little remote control is included out of the box, and they say, why isn't it included? Because people don't need it. It's a lot of resource added on top to include a remote controller, because what people do is they put them onto their networks and they start to be able to move them anyway. So that's why we try to do it in that kind of sense, that the web interface is easy to use as possible. And then you've got the option of the remote controller if you need to add it on. And one of those remote controllers, you can control 4 cameras at one time, or you adjust the infrared, and yeah, more.
And presumably you have to have clear line of sight as an infrared,
yes,
like you do with a TV remote, which I think would probably be the most limiting factor with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So line of sight is a key one. So if it starts to move out, or you have to go into the room physically to do it, it doesn't quite make sense. So
Sure.
being able to do it over the network makes much more sense.
So the software options, because you've got several different software options here, let's talk through some of the differences between those.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the web interface, we also have PTZ Control Center, and we also have auto tracking technology. And auto tracking technology, we do label that as a control option. So what that means is that the cameras, just using a PC that we have today, like my standard one here, we can actually tell the cameras to follow me around automatically. And I don't need to apply any infrared lanyards or anything like that. We're using a very clever piece of technology inside the software to be able to tell the cameras in real time where to follow. So I'd say, again, we've got one of the most versatile ranges of software, lots of different pieces inside. And PTZ Control Center being an amazing one. What that means is the software downloaded onto here, and I can control up to, again, 200 cameras on the network. I can see them monitored live. So if I've got lots of different rooms, or I've got a big production with cameras everywhere, I can just use this free piece of software to see them all in one view, control, activate presets, and go. It still amazes me this is a free piece of software.
Yeah, I mean, what here is a free piece of software and what here is a paid piece of software? The two on the left are the free ones?
Yeah, so all of it, apart from the auto tracking software, the auto tracking software is the only thing that's paid. But the auto tracking software also has a 90-day free trial where you can test it. So okay. It's really, so you can download it today. If you have Panasonic PTZs and you want to test the auto tracking software, at the end you can see where to download that. It's on our past page, it's very accessible, and then you can get an idea. And then when you're ready, if you're happy with the trial, then you can purchase the software. And
I believe you've got the auto tracking software enabled right now. Can we show it on the stream?
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
am I plunging you in the deep end there?
No, we can do it, absolutely. So I'll show you some of these softwares now, because again, I think it's always better to see what we're talking about. So I'll switch over to my PC on my feed, so we'll go full screen. So I have our different software pieces that I can go from here. So, I was saying, Carl, about networking. So when we plug all our cameras into a network, some people find it quite, let's say, intimidating with IP addresses and routing and all this kind of thing. So we do a free piece of software. In this case, we have our Easy IP Plus tool. So what that does is it looks for the camera on the networks, does it automatically for you. And from here, I can then see the camera. I can see a little image of me, and then I can just change the network address settings if I need to. So if I want to change the IP address, I can see the model number, I can see the serial number, that's it. If I hit the web GUI, it then takes me straight back into the actual camera feed on here. So that, when you have many cameras at once, that's all you do. We just see all the cameras at once, apply the IP addresses or access them And we can actually access them over Wi-Fi or different network adapters too. And that's a free piece of software. And it can also check firmware updates too. So if you're connected on the internet, it tells you which version it is, and it can batch update. So that's really important as well, because we do a lot of free firmware features added in, and you can just roll it out very, very simply.
That's actually
one
a really
piece of
cool
software.
feature, because it would be such a pain if you had to go around every single PTZ that you've got on the market, because all of these are used in multi-camera setups. With the new firmware update and applying it to every single one, and then you're inevitably going to miss one. It's nice to have just one central place to just check the firmware on everything. That's great.
Yeah, I wish the software came out years ago.
Yeah, I bet.
It's like staring at loading screens. If you had it all up in your life, you'd be scared how many years has gone. But that's again something to really get started with. And we do some more tutorials on how that works more in depth. In terms of the auto tracking software, which I think most people find the really, really interesting one as well, it's very different. So it's a Panasonic developed software. And what you can see right now, that little red box around me in the blue square, it's doing motion detection. So it's framing my body, and then it can also see my face. And this is just taking the IP stream from the camera, and the computer is actually processing in real time what's happening. So if I hit here, we can now see face detection activated. It can then take a sample of my face on there. It says target. That's a bit intimidating, isn't it? But it's just me. And then if I go stop on here, now the software is activated. Okay, so when I start to move around the studio, it's telling it where to go. Sure. So imagine if you're a single operator, if I wanted to do my own show again, I've got Ollie here, but he's not operating it.
You don't trust
but,
Ollie.
I can't. Yeah. Ollie's just there on the safety. But if I'm doing here and I'm showing the PTZs and I'm coming back, or I want to go and present something else, or do it over here, it's an amazing piece of technology.
Where this is fantastic for is lectures, both for university, to have a PTZ installed that can capture a lecture and then just track the lecturer as they walk around from the screen, but then also a corporate job and camera operator doing lectures and going in to do corporate speeches and all that sort of stuff. They can have one camera just following a smooth move around the operator all the time. Is it as good as an operator? No, but it means you don't have to have a physical operator there.
Always the question, isn't it? What we can actually do is if we have a server or a gaming PC or something, we can have up to 4 cameras tracking at one time. So then you can have up to 3 cameras tracking at once. So that's when it gets applied into lecture theatres and things. But it's really, to be honest, it's one of the most innovative things I think I've ever seen at the company being able to do this. Yeah, and that's using existing hardware today. So if you get a gaming PC or a server with a graphics card, the performance increases each time, so it gets better and better and better.
Yeah, so what sort of PCs do you need to be able to run this? Is it presumably it is from what you just said there, am I right in thinking that the performance of it will scale depending on the performance of your PC?
Exactly that. My PC here is just a standard i7 4 gig RAM. I haven't got a graphics card in here, so it works quite nicely. We use this as a demonstration tool all the time. Mm-hmm. But if I did have an NVIDIA graphics card put into a gaming PC, we then start to enhance the technology, and we can activate something called deep learning. And what deep learning is that the accuracy of the detection increases, and we get to get really close to nice operator on-air stylish movements. And it's perfect for stage tracking, exactly this kind of thing. Presentations, it makes it so much easier. And another bonus with those control panels, we can actually activate the tracking on and off with a user button. So it's an autopilot. So imagine that you have a 3-camera setup, and the middle camera, I just want to go off and get a coffee or something. User 2, auto tracking activates, and then you can manually control the other 2 cameras. So you can really focus on the nice production shots whilst you're leaving the center camera at the back doing the boring panning work. Because hiring an operator just to do those very basic movements doesn't really make too much sense, especially on the kind of day rates that exist. So you can have those really nice kind of production movements on them and focus on that and switch back to the auto tracking camera at the back. And it's perfect for that kind of conferencing environments, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you've got I'm just flicking through some of the slides that we've got here. This is a really good little example of a conference here with some of this technology being used, where you've got one camera at the back with the tracking software on speaker tracking, and then two at the sides, one as an audience shot and one as a production shot of the speaker. I think
Exactly.
that really clearly shows it.
And these are tools for operators. I think sometimes there's a consensus that it replaces things. Not at all. It's there to enhance your productions, to be able to get the most out of the cameras. You can get much more movements and shots if you're a much smaller crew. It's like having an extra crew member.
Okay, do you want to switch your camera back to, or is there anything else you want to show us on the software?
Last one, PTZ Control Center. So I'll jump over to that one. So again, free piece of software we can download. It's password protected. And we go into here, and as I said before, I've only got one camera currently plugged in, but you can see that we can have multiple cameras connected at once. So you get a little snapshot of the JPEG thumbnail, and then you can get an idea where it is. And if you want to jump into that camera, we can then see a preview image of the feed. We can see our presets, and we can control iris, gain, white balance, shutter, ND filters, the pan tilt speed. We've got a joystick inside as well to be able to move it. Another thing that we can also do with the software, we can plug in an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller, and we can actually move it with the PTZ. So use the triggers to zoom in and out. We can plug in a PC joystick if we wanted to. So you could be in your office, have this software open, and you can control it remotely. So you can really start to see, being able to have that. Here I've got it, the studio mapped out. And then if I click inside the studio, the camera's going to move into the position where it is.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's included on there as well. Yeah,
Very
so there's all these different types of things that we can do on there. So we've done some more videos on that, explaining what it does.
Sure, this is all just a very quick overview.
Exactly. So there's tons of things we can do inside the software, and again, that's downloadable today.
Okay, so we're going to start running out of time a little bit. So is there anything else in these slides coming up that you really want to make sure that we get to talk about? I suppose we've got some case studies, maybe those?
Yeah, case studies would be great, I think, because those are the real life examples.
Cool, let's spend the next sort of 10 minutes chatting through some of these case studies then.
Yeah, so you'll have to tell me which one we're on.
I'm on a picture of a PTZ at the moment, but let's go to the first one. So we are on pitch perfect live streaming at Gothenburg Symphony Orchestra. Is this first one?
So
that's an overall, I think. Yeah, London Symphony Orchestra, that's the first one.
Yeah, so London Symphony Orchestra, same kind of thing as well, the UB150s that you're using. So a big key part of that project is making sure that the sensitivity in theatres and noise is considered as well. So something that we don't think about with the PTZs is the sound that it also creates. So movement on stage. So as we know in theatre microphones especially, they can pick up flies farting, to be honest. We know how it is in productions, so they're very, very specific about the type of noise. But the cameras can be installed very, very closely to the talent. So when we've got the different sections, the cameras can be really, really close, and they're not intrusive at all. And the UB150 with its picture quality, and again, it was used in the Metallica concert, which was one of my favourite ones next to Lars Ulrich in the drums, managed to capture all of that. And it really looked like a professional kind of studio camera shoot in a small PTZ.
I imagine how loud the PTZ wasn't quite as much of an issue in the Metallica concert as it was in the London Symphony Orchestra.
No,
put one of them next to the drum kit, you're not going to notice a subtle camera sound, are you?
No, exactly. And there's a lot of theatres in London. We've been an amazing experience to see them in projects, but they're all doing the same thing, and they're sending the video feeds to signage outside or in the halls, and they're getting really nice shots of the cameras being so close. You can't typically do that by sending someone up on stage to get it, so it works really nice with the total piece. Sure. So it was a really cool project.
Sure. And then we've got some esports. Face It Flashpoint Season 2. This
just launched today, so it's a bit of an exclusive.
Okay.
So we just that case study came out this morning. So that was a really exciting project. That was very COVID related as well. They had an esports tournament in Twickenham and needed to deploy 5 UB150s, I think, and a dolly system for the camera to sit on. And it was a complete end-to-end remote production setup. And the story of how they managed that as well, they had some operators in hotel rooms and had to run the network between the hotel and the stadium as well. Wow. To be able to remotely operate it is really, really incredible. And it was the same kind of thing as well. They had less of a crew to be able to work on that, and they need to get some really nice production shots. So esports, as we know, is taking off beyond belief year on year. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So they were able to get really nice tracking shots, on-air style shots with UB150s combined with the tuning system, which is that dolly. And yeah, it was all fully automated. So it was a really, really cool project.
Very cool. Lafayette, there's a lot of 150s here.
Yeah, there are a lot of 150s, as I was saying earlier. Yeah, Lafayette, again, very, very similar in that sense as well. So chosen for pitch quality, ergonomics, quite prestigious, funnily enough. There's another case study, I don't know if it's mentioned in this one, but we did with our previous camera, the 130, which people might be familiar with. That was installed into Supreme Court. That was a really, really...
This next one.
That is here. Yeah. So this is using NDIHX technology. So they're using TriCaster setup, similar to you, and they're running NDIHX into Supreme Court. And a really interesting part about that, one of its first biggest broadcasts was when a certain Prime Minister got in trouble with the Supreme Court. That was using the remote camera system. And they had taken out a lot of existing broadcast analog technology and relied on NDIHX technology. So it's a big deal switching from that for such high profile broadcasts, but that also, again, you don't realize you've actually seen PTZ technology being used and completely over a network.
Sure. It's certainly been used at all sort of levels of the industry, isn't it? So Cisco Live San Diego is the last one we got here.
Yeah, so 63 PTZ
breakout sessions. Wow.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Yeah. Very small team, but basically we're using auto tracking software to capture every single seminar, and the cameras were tracking and following each presenter, and they were coordinating it. It's never been done before, I don't think, in that sense either. So they were using a lot of UE70s, so the smaller dome style PTZs, put onto tripods, and then running the auto tracking software on different servers, then able to track the different presenters at once. So it was an amazing feat of resource management to deploy for that event as well. So they pushed the bounds with the technology. So we love those types of projects and hearing about those, of people take the software and see how far they can go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it shows that they were happy with the auto tracking software to use it to that extent. I mean, you've got to have a lot of faith in a system to have 63 of them going at once for just one show.
Yeah, no, exactly. So we love case studies because they're a really good example of that's what it is, that's what it does. It's from our thankfully our partners as well. They're just telling their stories with the equipment. So we have many different types of examples of this with all different types of cameras, and we're excited to do more and more projects as they get more and more weird and wonderful, to be honest. So yeah, it's a very exciting time.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of your slides, and I don't think we've got any outstanding questions either. So thank you so much for that quick little rundown. Really useful to step back, and like I said at the beginning, just step back and have a bit more perspective over the entire range.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us as well. It's a pleasure to chat to you and be able to talk about it, and excited to do more and more things in the future because there's tons to talk about as always.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll be doing more over time. So if anyone at home has any questions about the PTZs at all, just leave them in the comment section of this video, wherever you found it, and we will get back to you. Or of course, just contact ProAV at proav.co.uk, or just email our sales team at sales@proav.co.uk, and we will be more than happy to help you out and include Panasonic if we need to. You send us your questions, send us your problems, we will try and fix them. So yeah, for now, thank you so much for joining me. Let's go enjoy some sunshine, shall we? Interestingly, for people watching at home, we normally do, nearly ended before mentioning it, we normally do a Q&A stream now at this time slot. We are still going to do that today, just in half an hour's time. So at 4:30, we'll be back live to do the normal chatty Q&A session. So if anyone wants to join me for that, you are more than welcome. But yeah, thanks so much, Dean.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone watching. Take care.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless